Dan Old's here. We're in South Africa at the Kruger National Park, which is quite the park, as it turns out. I've seen more animals here in one place than at most zoos. Of course, I've got kind of crappy zoos where I live. Anyway, the reason we're talking today is this is Vernon Nichols with Dell. And you've been involved with this whole student cluster thing, the South Africa part of it, from day one, right?
I have, Dan. Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, it's actually quite a journey, in fact. We started off a good couple of years ago. And do you want me to stop?
No.
Okay. So we started off a good couple of years ago.
We just had someone try and get into the room, not realizing we've taken it for our own. Now, he's probably scheduled to use the room, but once you have a camera and lights set up, they'll pretty much find someplace else to go. Anyway, back to our story.
So a couple of years ago, we actually were chatting from a Dell customer relationship perspective with the CHBC.
Happy Satoli.
Happy Satoli,
Sure.
Dr. Satoli, correct. And the commercial team approached me and said, well, guys, we have an idea and a concept that we believe from a Dell perspective we can assist Dr. Satoli in terms of his vision for CHBC and high-performance computing within Africa.
He reached out to...
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
he did. I believe he did. So 3 years ago, call it 3 years ago, because the competition where we have been involved has been for 3 years at the moment, we started the program where, as a program manager, I had assisted with all the necessary logistics, and we had, not unlike this competition, gone to Durban and really started the whole South Africa local competition from scratch.
That's amazing, because there's another event that we haven't seen, but it's sort of a training day for even a larger group of students to learn about HPC and to see if they have the wherewithal to put together a team. And then the teams get to come to the regional event, which we're at right now. 8 teams this year. And then the winner goes on to ISC in Germany.
Correct.
And so you were involved from the first competition on. Was it difficult to sell Dell management on this? Because Dell provided all the hardware and the logistics support, plus the commitment to send the winning team to Germany.
You know,
Did you have to explain what these things were? 'Cause they'd been involved with other teams before, but they were US based.
So from my side, I've got an amazing team that I work with. I think the commercial team that owns the relationship with the customer has been really instrumental in assisting and motivating our involvement as part of Dr. Satoli's vision for this. So I think management bought almost immediately into the idea
Really?
of the exposure, of what we can do, and obviously ticking all the boxes in terms of the South African requirement
Sure.
in order for us to form part of this international
Wanting
exposure.
to be a full partner
Absolutely.
as opposed to just a vendor.
I absolutely agree, which is why I mentioned it was really a journey from a good couple of years ago. So the journey has taken us from service provider to partnership.
That's neat. That's neat. And all of the kids you've met so far, and you've watched them come up from those training days when they don't really know much of anything. In fact, the kids I spoke to today, those training days, they were thinking it might be parallel programming. They weren't really sure what it was, what HPC was or anything like that. But getting them to the point where they put together their own cluster and bring it to the intra-country competition, and then taking that first team to Germany, what was that like?
Oh, I think that took everyone by surprise. I'm not going to lie to you. I think winning being the ultimate goal was really unforeseen.
Oh, yeah, it was unforeseen. It was unforeseen by the other 10 teams there, 8 that year.
Yeah.
That was unforeseen by them. It was unforeseen by me. Started to get an inkling, though, when I'm going around the floor, as I do, and around 4 or 5 o'clock, other teams are heading out or gone, or half of them are gone, and Team South Africa is still there. Heads down, working. They get kicked out of the hall. They go back to their hotel room, working a bit more. That starts to maybe make you think.
Absolutely agree. The dedication and hard work that these youngsters put in surprised me.
Yeah.
In my day, being a student was all about being a student. These guys came out, delivered, had no sleep for a good couple of days.
And by the way, in the months before, it's all on their own time.
Absolutely.
They don't have a class in this. It's and they're spread somewhat geographically too.
That's correct. That's correct. So they were split. In fact, if memory recalls, they were split between Cape Town and Johannesburg.
Yeah, the first year. Yes.
The first year.
Yeah.
Correct.
And it's quite a feat, though. But how tough is it logistically to support one of these competitions?
Well, I think that's probably what my forte is in order to put the logistics together. So people don't realize what really goes in. From a concept that the students may think they know in terms of, without getting too technical, putting the Intel CPUs together, the memory that goes
You can
together
get
with
pretty
it, the
technical
throughput.
with this audience, by the way, so don't worry about that.
Okay. So,
But the thing, and actually to drill down while we're talking about that, one of the things that they did, and I think you originated this, is that rather than just opening the entire big book of SKUs to the students and giving them a power limit, you went at it from the other way. You gave them a dollar limit that they could spend, and then you gave them a limited range of products. And while that might sound restrictive, what I like about it is it's actually more difficult because they're forced to make the choice. When you look at the price of the components between we have fast CPUs and not quite as many nodes, or we can have a lot of nodes with slower CPUs. We can go with a 1 gigabit interconnect with a switch or without a switch if we want to, or we can go with 10 gigabit NICs and do our own switch, make our head node the switch, or we can go with 10 gigabit interconnect and have a 10 gigabit switch, but we're not going to have as many nodes or nodes with as much oomph when it comes to processing power. And that's a lot of choices. And there's of course variations within the CPUs, how much memory, and all that has to come up and be underneath that bottom line number you give them.
absolutely. Yeah,
Did you design it that way to force those choices, or was it just lucky?
Well, I think from an initial team program perspective, working with my colleagues within the South African Johannesburg office, we realized that we need to come up with a different approach, a better or maybe unique South African approach.
Yeah, it is.
By changing the scope of what these guys can really get. It's easy to go top of the range enterprise class products, and you buy one server with a GPU, but that's not really the point.
It's not reality. You're always constrained somehow.
Exactly.
And you need to make choices based on what you're going to be running, which they know the applications, and on what your pocketbook is. And they know that too.
Yeah, exactly. So we really turned out and said, well, how do we make this less complex but still give them the scope? So that's why we said, well, let's create a budget for them. Because in reality, like we just chatted about now, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
HPC is an expensive market. Yes, it's an investment that you maybe have every 5 to 8 years, depending on your vendor. But in this case, let's give them the option, but let's not narrow it down too much.
True.
So these guys really have, bottom class enterprise products that we really give them with the basic networking. But that being said, we always underestimated the performance that these guys got out of the machines.
And if you would have told me before I came to Cape Town last year that, okay, we're giving them a constrained list of what they can do, I'd be going, okay, we're going to see everybody running exactly the same thing. I was shocked at the variation. I mean, there were, just for a quick example, there were students that were running 8 and 10 node systems. There were students that were running 4 nodes of highly configured workstations that they had used 10 gig NIC cards in and done their own routing tables. There were variations in disk and memory. I mean, it was not the same at all. And that was incredible that you have that kind of variation.
Yeah, the way that they designed and put together their own concepts was very unique. They took all the theoretical calculations that they could get, that the textbooks give you, and the way they put it together, it just depicts the flavor that we've got within South Africa anyway.
But and the other thing too is you're going to see the little things, like we did have a team that initially was going to put one drive in RAID 0 configuration, which gives you the performance of one drive with a little bit of extra latency. But they were corrected on that. And
Absolutely.
But it was a good idea. But you need more than one spindle to really make that work.
Agreed.
But it's neat. They learn all that stuff. They learn and they make those mistakes here, and they learn the right way to do things.
Absolutely. I think we're in a unique position from a Dell perspective that not only do we give them a little bit of a taste of what we can offer, in terms of putting this together, in terms of empowering them to start working on enterprise class equipment. But further down the line, as we head maybe towards the international competition,
Yes.
the detail and the nuts and bolts really get scratched
And
open.
that opens up. The SKUs open up to
Absolutely.
whatever we have.
Exactly. Then it becomes a different discussion. Then
It
becomes
does.
a power discussion and not so much a budget discussion.
But they understand that the constraint is there, and they're understanding that they have a concept in their head now
Yeah.
of how this needs to be put together. And they've always come to the ISC competitions with more of the heavyweight class systems as opposed to the cruiserweight class systems,
Yeah.
but balanced. Never went overboard with GPUs, never went overboard with CPUs and frequencies. It was like just a solid, balanced system,
Yeah.
and they knew how to use it.
Absolutely. I think taking into account, again, looking at white papers can only give you a number.
Yeah.
But giving these guys the ability to really push these machines to the limit, understand what overclocking is, understand what power capping and power limitation does. Where are the pros and cons? Where do you weigh up? What is a give and take on these machines?
And how to keep something from spiking, from power spiking
Yeah.
when you fire it up. That's a lot of ins and outs.
Exactly.
And the thing is that these are kids that really haven't had access to these classes systems. And it's a gratifying. Now, the other thing too, by the way, that I want to make sure we get in here is you're not just tossing hardware and advice and meetings at them. You took them to Texas.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
You know what? It is very cool. In fact, it's also it's even cooler because we get to sit with the experts of TAC.
Yeah, TAC.
And we get to sit with the experts of our Dell engineering team, and we get to really delve deep in. We're scratching the surface over here in this competition.
That's the thing is that I interviewed the students for a while this morning, and that'll be posted too. But in that interview, we talked about what those meetings were like, and the meetings with TAC, more along the lines of this is HPC, here's the kind of workloads, this kind of thing. But but what they were doing with the Dell guys that I thought was great is that sitting in a room much like this, they had to get up in front of a whole bunch of engineers and present, this is the system that we're thinking about, this is what we're looking at doing and why. And then the Dell engineers picked it apart and helped them understand where you can do it this way, and that's great if it's these types of applications, but what if it's not? Don't you want to make sure you have a fallback? I mean, they had a kind of a nice brainstorming session and leading the students, educating the students and leading them to those right conclusions, not telling them, hey kid, this won't work, that's dumb.
Yeah.
It's that if you're going to go with this particular interconnect, how well is that going to work with everything you need to do? What if there are no GPU-centric applications in there? What if they're all GPU-centric?
Yeah.
It was a really neat thing, and their eyes were opened by that session, both teams.
I absolutely agree with you. And you know what? It's a privilege to be able to sit together with all the students in that forum and the great minds of HPC and engineering thinking, hey, my concept's going to work here. And not a bad thing, but to get holes shot into it in order for you
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
understand what you thought technology can do is not only might not even meet your expectation,
Yeah.
but over exceed your expectation. And by the way, you can break it and re-break it and remodel it and do it.
Lots of different ways to do
Yeah.
things. You can skin these cats many different ways. But
Absolutely.
at the same time, being in the room so that you're not exchanging emails, that you can say, yes, but we thought because of this. And to have the engineer say, okay, that's an interesting thought, but here are the trade-offs.
Absolutely.
And it worked out great from that standpoint.
From my perspective, it being part of the program, I've always believed in FaceTime, as opposed to, well, not in the technology sense, but as opposed to email and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, literally looking at somebody working on a problem together is always the better option.
See, and that's a tough thing for South Africa in that you don't have a TAC here. And TAC, of course, has their own team, University of Texas, that gets plenty of FaceTime there. And this is evening the playing field. The Chinese teams work out of supercomputer centers.
Yeah.
You're leveling it out. And the teams have gone on and excelled. It's just incredible. I mean, winning it once was great, and lightning kind of struck. But winning it twice and winning it by a larger margin, that's a much bigger deal.
Absolutely.
And it just increases the pressure. The kids that we're watching now, and you'll see these videos up and down the aisles, they're feeling that. The closer this gets to being real, the more they're starting to feel that we're working hard, but we're going to keep working hard.
Yeah.
There's none of this, we're just happy to be here. We're just happy to be included. Mm-mm. They're there to excel.
I absolutely agree with you. Looking at this year, for example, as opposed to the previous years, it's always a good feeling that I get as a South African to know that we always rise to the challenge.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
year one, we walked away with
Against
the
all
trophy.
odds, too.
Year two, we did it. These guys, having my own personal discussions and one-on-ones, like you said, they are rising.
Mm-hmm.
They are not scared.
And
they want it as bad as if they were the first team.
And the thing is that I want to make clear, different from any other cluster competition team, South Africa doesn't recycle members. You get one shot to go to the championship.
Yes.
This team will be unique and new. They've been mentored by the older teams, the other teams, but every member, this is their first international shot. And that's great from a couple of perspectives. I mean, the design point for it, for Dr. Satoli, was to spread HBC knowledge as far and as wide as quickly as possible.
Yes.
But from a competition standpoint, in some ways it's a disadvantage because these kids have been there, done that, and sure, we've done WRF. We did that 2 years ago. We'll be fine. We're okay. Kind of a disadvantage in that case. But in the other sense, that they are eager. They're not jaded.
Yeah.
They're not going to play around. They're not going to cut any corners. They're going to go after it. And South Africa is one of the few teams in the competitions that you've been in where they've turned in a result for every single task.
Yes.
They may not win every single task, but they've turned in a result. And out of the 11 teams in each competition, maybe 2 or 3 have done that. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to their spirit of they're not going to give up.
Agreed.
And they're also not going to get wrapped around the axle over optimizing something that they suddenly realize that we don't have time to run now. That we are fully 100% optimized. Unfortunately, we don't have time to run it.
Yeah.
But it would have been great if we had.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So the future, do you see Dell in this partnership continuing? Is it enough is there enough momentum here with Dell and the student cluster competition to where there's always going to be Dell backstopping that effort, do you think?
So, well,
It's not inexpensive. It's not hugely expensive, but it's the kind of thing that it's a big enough expense that it needs some approvals from America, but it's a small enough thing that you worry about it could perhaps get lost in the shuffle.
there's a huge drive in terms of HPC. Mm-hmm. And I think working together with the team of experts that we have and locally sharing that vision in terms of drive, I believe in the near future we're probably still going to be here to stay.
Good.
I think the partnership there has grown tremendously between ourselves and all the parties involved. I think we've got enough traction, to answer your question, in order to be able to move forward. I think how we move forward, might just change a little bit in the future.
There's some things might change.
But moving forward will happen nevertheless.
Excellent. One of the things I'd like to see, just to put you on the spot a little bit, and I know that this isn't your call and it's not Dell South Africa's call, but these systems that the students are using for practice here, 8 small clusters, 3-4 nodes each, I know that they get shipped back and then they're put through the Dell refurbishing process and probably sold, maybe at a loss or a break even. It would be really great if there was some way that those systems could stay in country and be used again for that next set of students to practice on, to figure out how to build a cluster. There's ways to do it. I mean, in some of the things, I think that Amazon gave the students some free time to go up into the cloud and build their clusters, but it's not the same thing as when you actually have the hardware in front of you and you've cabled it together and you have to get the OS on and all of that kind of thing. It's different tools, it's different stuff. And it would be great if there's a way to keep some of these systems in the system here and have them devoted to supporting these efforts.
I think it would be. I think that probably brings me to the previous topic that we discussed in terms of how we're going to move forward and how we
Yeah.
believe we're going to do things.
Yeah.
It could also open up another chapter in terms of, well, because these systems are so middle class or middleweight or lightweight,
Lightweight. I would say probably light. I mean, they're clustering middling workstations together.
Agreed.
They're clustering together really two-way PCs. There's no accelerators here.
correct, there's no accelerators
They
at all.
could do it, but it's a big hit on their budget. But
Yeah.
there's no accelerators, so it's basically dual socket PCs that they're clustering together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, taking that technology into account and maybe having a look at possible recycling within South Africa, not recycling in the sense of cleaning the machine or whatever, but
No.
giving it back to the community.
To that university to help them
Correct.
do it again.
It may just open up or cause conversations to open up the class of machine in order to be able to use those machines effectively, should that be the case. But it is definitely something that we cannot afford not to think about in
Yeah.
terms of how to move forward and how to grow HPC and
Yeah.
give back to the community.
And it's not like it's a big additional expense, but I know that with a lot of these teams here and the teams that competed in the other Inside Africa competition, they didn't have any access to anything they could cluster together. Every bit of hardware was already being used by some other part of the computer science department or by researchers. They were to the point where they were putting together old PCs and laptops to be able to try out the concepts. If there were 3 nodes of workstations reserved for their use, that could be a pretty cool thing. It'd be a difference maker, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a different place in terms of where they are in HPC than the rest of the world, but they're coming along fast. I mean,
Yeah.
And it's students like this, and that's the other thing, by the way. Isn't it fun just to meet these kids and to get to know them?
Yeah, absolutely.
The drive that they have. God, I wouldn't be here doing this if I had that kind of drive.
Yeah.
I'd be in much better shape. I would look better. There'd be many different changes if I had that kind of drive. You're in a good position here, but still, it's just incredible to be close to that and to watch their faces as they learn something new
Yeah, absolutely.
and see what they look like when their name is announced as the winner, the overall winner.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
I agree. I feel proud.
You should. I do too, and I have done nothing for it. But and I hope Dell does too. I hope they feel that back in Austin, because everything they're doing out here, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb, the thing that they do out here is probably twice as hard as what University of Texas does. University of Texas is the only team to have won at SC 3 times.
Yeah.
The ISC competition is just as pointed as the SC competitions. There are just as many experienced teams, and for South Africa to do it coming from an infrastructure place that they are is a huge achievement.
Yeah.
Not that, Texas has achieved a lot too, but they were halfway up the ladder. Yeah. These guys have had to climb the whole ladder
Absolutely.
every time.
Every year.
Yes, from scratch.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you. Any closing thoughts, comments,
Well, I
complaints?
think, well, you know what? I think for a competition of this caliber, it's just representing the brand. I think is the best way we can go forward. I think with the relationships that we have, we're trying to get Africa on the map here,
Yeah.
and we're getting there, and we're going to be getting there very quickly. I think
And
you know where the industry is
it's-
going to, and we have to keep it up.
And you're doing not just the right thing, you're doing a good thing here, but it's something that's going to pay off for Dell commercially down the road too. It's just good business,
Yeah,
and you're investing in your market.
and we're proud.
Good. On that prideful note, thank you for watching, and watch for more videos coming from South Africa and from the other student cluster competitions. Thanks again.
Keep it real, Dan.
Talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Out to the barbecue now.
Yeah.
Here we go. Thanks.